Good morning and welcome. From the Old State House in Boston, Massachusetts, I'm Jim Newland, and we're gathered here for the first 2016 United States presidential debate. Here joining us today, we have Sir Isaac Newton and Mr. Benjamin Franklin. Please welcome our presidential candidates for this year's election. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Benjamin Franklin. And Sir Isaac Newton. Welcome, Mr. Benjamin Franklin, Sir Isaac Newton. Sir Newton, you're wearing sunglasses today. Can you please explain?
Well, Jim, I know they're not quite as sporty as old Ben's spectacles here, but the reason I'm wearing these is because I used to do a lot of experiments with prisms and light, studying diffraction. It's something that's always fascinated me, and while these experiments made possible the cover of Pink Floyd's album Dark Side of the Moon, which was phenomenal, they also unfortunately had the consequence of causing some minor eye damage, some interference in my eyesight. So I wear these to protect them from the bright lights.
Today's 2016 presidential debate will focus on 4 key questions regarding healthcare, job creation, foreign policy, and education. To begin, Mr. Franklin, what is your position on healthcare reform in this country?
Well, you know, as they say, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. What we need to do is teach our children to eat right. But when they don't, because we know children are children, we need to have doctors available at any cost. I call this Franklin Care. It is still in the drafting process, but it'll be the best healthcare reform in the history of the United States, and our children and our citizens will stay healthy and be healthier than they ever have been. Thank you.
Sir Newton.
Well, I believe that nothing will ever change unless we apply a force to change it ourselves. I apply my first law of motion to this. An object at rest will remain at rest unless an outside force is applied to it, and we must apply that force. And I believe, kind of like that. And I believe also, in addition to helping our children, we need to reform the mental institutions in this country. I've had some personal experience with mental illness, my family and myself, and I believe that there could be great reform done in this.
Thank you, Sir Newton, Mr. Franklin. We'll now move on to job creation. Sir Newton, how do you plan to create more jobs for this nation?
Well, as for job creation in this country, I think there's a severe lack of physicists and mathematicians. And as you well know, this is something that is dearly important to me, as I've spent my entire life in the pursuit of the sciences and mathematics. And if there are more mathematicians and physicists in the country, I believe that we'll surpass all other nations. So I really think that we need to encourage more people in this country to become proficient in these areas.
Mr. Franklin, what's your plan on job creation for this country?
Well, I respectfully disagree with my opponent here. There are plenty of mathematicians and physicists in this world. In fact, we could probably use a bit less of them. But one thing we could use, I remember back in my day of my many studies with electricity and with the kite experiment. I was flying the kite with the key, and you all know the story. But we could really use more electrical engineers and engineers in general.
Thank you. Now we move on to education. Mr. Franklin, what is your policy? What's your stance on education for Americans?
Well, with education, I would like to take a page from the book Common Sense from my colleague Thomas Paine. We don't need to do anything drastic or different. We just need to use common sense in our education and our education plans. The education is a very important part of life. While it's true that if you don't have an education, you can still make it, in general, we need to stress the fact that all of our kids need to be educated. and we need to pave the way for them if they don't have the ability to be educated. As well, we need to include, I wrote a book called the Poor Richard's Almanac. If we include that into our education system and just read through this book and learn from the insights there, just to teach our children that they're important. Every child is important and needs to be educated and to have a good career and a good family and a good life. So yes, thank you.
So would you say that you favor government intervention?
Oh, of course. Because sometimes people need to be told that they need to be educated. Some people are just going to be lazy and not do anything. And so while they may think that's good for them at the moment, that they don't have to be educated when they're 20 years into the future, when they learn that, they look back on their lives like, oh, I wish I had gone to school. We can prevent that if we have government intervention in the education system and to force them to be educated, because then when they look back, when they're making all this money and they're successful and they have all their desires and their dreams, then they can look back and say, like, I am glad. I didn't want to go to school, but I am glad that they made me go to school. And I'm glad that they helped pave the way and they helped pay for my education as well, because what's most important is to be educated.
Sir Newton, what's your position on education for Americans?
Education in America has been suffering. I think there needs to be a lot done to reform this. I look back to my days when I was in college. There was a whole semester where the college shut down, and all of my classmates, they were glad to be free of this burden of education. They went off to the beach, to vacation, wherever they wanted. I stayed in my dorm, and I invented calculus that summer. And I think this shows that we need to be focused on the pursuit of knowledge and progressing. We can contribute to society. From that summer, I went on later to write Principia Mathematica, and it's changed the entire world, if I may say so myself. And if students are not filled with this desire to learn and to progress, then our nation can't progress. And for those who don't agree with these things, who think these things are too complicated, I have the right to say, I have studied these, you have not. I want every American to have the right to say that.
Thank you. Thank you, Sir Newton. Mr. Franklin, we now move on to our final point of foreign policy. Sir Newton, what is your stance on foreign policy, and how do you plan to protect Americans?
Foreign policy, well, I can draw from my experience as a fellow of Parliament, and I saw many things there, and I heard different opinions on how to treat other nations, and I really think that, as with everything in life, physics best applies to this policy. My third law of motion states that every force has an equal and opposite reaction. And I believe that should be our policy with other nations. If they treat us kindly, we will treat them kindly. But if they strike us, we will strike back with an equal and opposite force, so they know that we mean business.
Mr. Franklin, how do your views compare?
Foreign policy is something I've actually had a lot of experience. And let me quote the great Mahatma Gandhi real quick. An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. And so while yes, at times, just like in the American Revolution, it's necessary to take action and to establish the peace. Attacking with an equal and opposite force is just going to anger the whole world. And what's that going to do? Yes, at times we need to take measures, but the most important part is peace, to having relationships with the other countries. I participated in the signing of the Declaration of, drafting the Declaration of Independence with Jefferson and Madison. I signed the Treaty of Paris to end the American Revolutionary War, and was known worldwide for my foreign policy and a mediator, really. And so, as President of the United States, I plan to use this experience to help us gain the trust with all the other nations around the world, so that we can have that peace, so that we can all remember that no matter what country we live in, we are still brothers. We are all human beings, and we need to treat each other like human beings. So yes, the foreign policy is very good to have, and we can't just fight each other and think that the other person's an enemy or a monster, because they're not. They're a person, they're a human being, and we need to establish that diplomacy and that peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Franklin, Sir Newton. We now come to the final portion of this debate. We now ask, Mr. Franklin, why should you be President of the United States?
Well, thank you. Let me explain why you should vote for me as the President of the United States. The simple and bold answer is that I have the experience. I worked with signing of the Declaration of Independence. I worked in drafting the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. I know what our founding fathers in America wanted for us. I know exactly all the laws and the treaties and how their vision for America I helped draft. Without my knowledge and my experience, our country would have fallen apart. I have the utmost respect for my opponent, Sir Isaac Newton, but the elephant in the room has to be addressed. While he has a little bit of a political background, first of all, he's not really American, and so he doesn't know how the American Constitution works. We can't establish a British parliamentary into our system. Also, as he is saying, he is a mathematician, he is a scientist. He should go focus on inventing more calculus or being a mathematician. As a President of the United States, he doesn't have the experience that I do. I worked with our founding fathers. I know what's good for this country, and I will be one of the best presidents that this country will ever have. Thank you.
Sir Newton, why should you be President of the United States of America?
Oh, me? Well, to address some of the points that my opponent has just said, being just a mathematician and just a physicist, I am one of the leading minds of our time in the knowledge of the physical sciences, of mathematics, of this world around us. And if we have that as our base, the knowledge that nature tries to teach us, then we can apply that to any other field and become an expert in it. I have a mastery of these subjects. I have written books, I have created entire fields of study. As you can clearly derive, I will be able to integrate these things into all of our daily lives and further the progress of this nation based on the laws of physical science. To address another point that my opponent has just raised, I did not just have a little role in Parliament. I spent the latter half of my life doing political activities, and I believe that I am fully qualified to further this country as a politician. I helped improve the economy and numerous other aspects of my country. And true, I am not an American, but I have studied your ways, and I am trying to fit in. And clearly, I mean, why would you not vote for someone who looks like Kenny G, one of your own? I will fit into this country, and I promise to lead you well.
Thank you, Sir Isaac Newton and Mr. Benjamin Franklin. From the Old State House in Boston, Massachusetts, I'm Jim Newland. Thank you, and we'll see you at the voting polls.